Hey everybody, it's Beth. Welcome to Infinite Garden. I've been getting a lot of comments since I've been wearing my hair a little curly. I've been getting a lot of comments from folks who also have curly hair or who have sort of, like comments or questions about my curly hair. And it's funny because this is something that has been with me for my life. And I know a lot of you who have curly hair have gone through kind of periods of loving it, maybe, or definitely periods of hating it. And I certainly have too. And I wanted to make a video about my curly hair. I have one that I made a little while ago that's just a curly hair chat. But I wanted to make another one, and then I sat down to write down my thoughts, and I realized I have like a series. I could honestly go on and on and on about my hair, and I intend to. So I'm going to make some videos for the next while about curly hair. I'm going to try to cover sort of some of the deeper thoughts about our culture and the way it views curly hair, how that can impact us. I'm also going to share some more care tips and also some ways to style it. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned for this video and stay on the lookout for some other ones coming up soon. But today I want to talk about how I went from hating my curly hair to loving it. If that sounds interesting, please stay tuned. So, curly hair, if you have it, you know it's an entirely different world from having straight hair that you care for. It requires different products, an entirely different approach, and if you don't have people in your life who also have curly hair and know how to manage it, you can be kind of out of luck. And I know that I personally found out almost everything I needed to know to care for my curly hair from the natural hair community on YouTube. So I just wanted to say that first. I grew up in a part of the country, so in the United States, I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is a heavily Scandinavian dominant community. And where I was, a lot of the folks around me had very fine, thin, fair hair, and that was sort of the beauty standard as well. And my hair differed from that. And it was pointed out to me on a daily basis that my hair was different and that it was other from what kind of was the standard of that era and time and norm. And that had an impact on me. I don't know how it is for other people. When I moved around, I didn't live my whole life in Minnesota, but I grew up my whole life until I went to college in Minnesota. And so most of the people that I knew, when I was younger, perms were in. And so people had curly hair, but almost entirely through salon effect. And then otherwise, most people around me really did have like straight, fine, kind of Northern European hair. And I just didn't have anybody around me who actually really could like tell me what to do. My mother has coarse hair, but she didn't wear it long in ringlets like this. She kind of kept it shorter and would set it or whatever. So she was really coming at it with a different end game. And I attracted a lot of comments all throughout my life, and it made me, in some ways, insecure about my hair because it was always a topic of conversation. I could never just like go about my business. People always had something to say about it. I got a lot of nasty comments too, especially from folks who naturally adhered to the beauty standard that was common in our community. Most of the nasty comments I got were from people who were kind of like conforming by nature to that, and they would let me know that I was outside of the standard and I wasn't measuring up. And that hurt me a lot when I was younger. But then at the same time, the reality is that curly hair is kind of like awesome, right? And so I got a lot of positive comments. There were a lot of people who either thought it looked like it was fun or they thought it was beautiful. And sometimes people would say that they wish that they had curly hair. So I was getting kind of both kinds of comments at once. And so I eventually kind of learned to take the negative comments as kind of akin to a form of jealousy. I think people saw me, they saw this trait that was attracting a lot of attention that they didn't have. And the rules of the game where we were to have, thin, straight blonde hair. And I was breaking the rules, so I had to be kind of put in my place. This only really happened in Minnesota. When I left the state to go to college, I went to college in Wisconsin, which you think would be kind of similar, but it actually, for some reason, I just didn't receive that kind of feedback. I think maybe because it's less dominantly Scandinavian, people had more variety of hair colors and types, and I didn't stand out as much as I did. And then later in my life, when I moved to California, I never got really any comments whatsoever about my curls, really. I mean, it's such a hugely diverse place that, again, I didn't stand out for having curly hair. And I noticed that I got like a break from having to answer for it a lot. And that was really nice. I moved back to Minnesota in my late 20s and through my mid 30s, and it all came back again. It was a lot of conversation about my curly hair. What was my ethnicity? Where did my curls come from? Why were they so wild? All of these things. And that it bummed me out, honestly, and because I had gotten a break from it for a while. And eventually, when I moved from Minnesota again, I moved to another part of the Midwest where I live now. And again, no one ever really talked to me about it again. This is a place where I see lots of curly heads, and I don't stand out for having curly hair here either. If I do get any comments, it's generally pretty positive, or it's from other curly heads where, if you have curly hair, you love to ask other curly heads sort of what products do they use, where do they get their hair cut, all of those things. So most of the comments were kind of related to that. But I just wanted to share that to say that, if you're on my channel, you may have found me through my gray hair content, and I have made sort of like a comparison, frankly, like the journey to accepting my gray hair has been a certain kind of journey, and it has a lot of similarities to how I accepted my curly hair over time, which I've been working on for decades. So it almost like primed me to make it easier to accept that my gray hair. And I just have a ton to say about it. That was already kind of a lengthy intro, but one of the things that's interesting about my curly hair is that is how I got it. So when I was younger, my hair was prone to curl, and it could hold a curl really well. My mother has kind of similar hair. I got it from her. My dad has very silky fine hair, so mine was a little bit in between my mom and my dad's. Here's a picture of me from a button. My mom recently sent me a giant Ziploc baggie full of like buttons from sports and dance when I was younger, and they're hilarious. So I'm going to be using those as background for like with what I look like growing up. So this is me from the days, like the 2 years I played soccer, which although it was fun and I liked to run and all of that, I was really a serious girly girl, very femme. And I caught a soccer ball in the face one time, and it chipped one of my teeth down here, and I was done. So this is my one soccer button. But this is what my hair looked like when I was, I think I'm like in third or fourth grade here. So you can see it was prone to ringlets but it was pretty silky. And then here's a picture of me where actually I'll hold on that one for a second. When I was in seventh grade, it was extremely popular at that time. It was early 90s. It was extremely popular for people with straight hair to get spiral perms. And I begged my mother for me to get a spiral perm. And she was like, your hair's already curly. You don't need a perm. That's for girls with straight hair. Your hair's great. You don't need it. And I pushed and pushed and pushed because my hair was sort of wavier and fluffier. And I really wanted that spiral perm that everybody had. So she eventually kind of gave in, let me do what I want. And I got a spiral perm in seventh grade. And here's a comparison of two dance buttons, one from I think it's either fifth or sixth grade before my perm, and then one I think it could be even eighth or ninth grade after my perm. So I did dance from the age of 3 until all the way through high school. It was my favorite for sure. So these are like really funny. I love these pictures so much. So you can see that even just like, not to be creepy, but even just like looking at my body, you can tell I've gone through puberty between these two pictures. There's years between them. And what's interesting is I only ever got one spiral perm. I got one spiral perm in seventh grade. And I remember how other girls I would see their perms grow out. They would have like this, they have like inches of their natural growth. And sometimes it'd be straight and then it'd be like curly below. Anyone who's around my age will remember this. I remember for me, after I got my spiral perm in seventh grade, waiting for any evidence that it was ever going to grow out. And it never did. I know that sounds impossible, but it happens. And I remember going back to the hairdresser and saying, like, hey, is this supposed to grow out at some point? She said that it's not unheard of for people who are like maybe have wavy or are prone to curls and puberty to do a chemical process where you break the bond of the cuticle and you reshape it. It can permanently reshape the hair. And that is absolutely what happened to me. And people didn't really believe me. It wasn't until I went to college and I met another girl from Chicago who had the same experience, that I had ever met anybody who had that same story. So my hair, when I recently did like a DNA test through Ancestry, they give you some traits. And they said on mine that my genetics show that I'm likely to have wavy hair. And I got that. I was like, well, yeah, that's true. If I hadn't gotten that perm, I probably would have had wavy hair. But I did get the perm, and now it looks like this. And, it's still drying right now. It takes forever to dry. It's very thick. But I don't even know why I brought that up. I'm just like right now, I don't think you can see the full extent of it, but you can see how much I have and how curly it is. This is something that I've just been living with since then. And it seems to have changed a little bit as I've grown older. So like when I was in my 20s, I wore it as long as possible, as big as possible, just like huge. And here's some pictures of that. You can see there's one where I have a cut. I'm here on the Brooklyn Bridge, and my hair's cut. But the other two pictures are when I'm in like the college era part of my life. Here's me also in the middle with a footman at the Sir Francis Drake in San Francisco. You can see how big it was. And so this attracted a ton of attention. And at this time, I never ever wore it blown out or straight. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't really know that it was possible. So this is what I look like 24/7. And a lot of people knew me by my hair. As I'd walk around campus or whatever, people would say, oh, I saw you from 2 blocks away. I knew your hair. So that it's been like a huge part of my identity for a long time. I didn't really know though how to care for it because almost all of my friends had straight hair and no one in my family was wearing their hair like this. So I was making a bunch of mistakes in my care for it. I shampooed every single morning. I would suds my scalp and my hair every single morning, put in some conditioner, rinse that out, and then usually I would use like gel or mousse. And that would keep my hair looking at least fresh and clean and set every morning. But it really dried my hair out. I had a lot of breakage and my hair always, I think, desperately needed moisture. I didn't really learn how to care for my hair until I got, until YouTube, honestly. So this would have put me in my 30s. I started watching videos from the natural hair community. So women, mostly with African descent, who had been previously relaxing their hair, who had decided to cut off the relaxed parts of their hair and embrace their natural hair texture and use a different kind of shampoo, either no poo or a certain kind of like light sulfate shampoo, and then tons of conditioner, all the conditioner the hair could hold. So I'd never really heard of this before. All of my stylists had been Caucasian and didn't really understand the kind of hair that I had. This new approach from the natural hair community, I immediately checked it out, tried it, and found it to be 100% what I needed. I also started paying attention to the Diva Curl method, if you guys know that. This is sort of it's a brand, and there's a way to cut hair, and then there's a whole line of products. And so I also explored that. I found someone who could do Diva cuts, and I started trying some of their products, some of which I still use today. Like even today I used a spray gel over the leave-in conditioner that I used, and I do use the one conditioner still. So like that line is great as well. So part of it for me was also figuring out how to care for it, because generally speaking, when I would look in 17 magazine, Cosmo, Vogue, if they had any kind of hair tips, it was always for women with straight hair. And I think that's changing. I really do. I can see when I look at magazines or content like that's like Vogue's content that's digital or whatever, they're embracing the fact that they have readership that varies all across all ethnicities and hair type. And I think they're starting to open up what they talk about to all types. And I think that's great. I would have really benefited from that, but at least I'm glad that it's happening now. In terms of what kind of hair I have, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this is a chart that exists. Some people criticize it or whatever, but I found it helpful. This is the spectrum of hair type basically from straight with no bend to a tighter. There's a coil, and then there's also kind of like this zigzag feature. I have drawn this yellow box around the hair types that I find on my head. I think it's really common for all people, especially people with some texture or curl in their hair, to see a variety of hair types growing out of their scalp, and I am certainly that person. I do sometimes get wavy hairs that would fall on like the looser end of the spectrum, because I think that's like what Ancestry said and what I had before. I think that was actually like what I was originally intended to have, was this sort of wavy hair. But then I also have, and you can see here, I try to get a bright light today so you can see, I have some very coarse curly hairs that can fall as far as, you can see into the spectrum how tight they can get sometimes. And overall, I would say my hair falls around the 3B range. That's sort of what I manage for now. And I'm really into it. It took me a long time. Before, when I didn't have any feedback from any of the beauty publications about how to take care of my hair and all of that, I did feel invisible. And especially, not really having a lot of friends who had really textured hair, I didn't have anyone who understood. So they would say like, oh, go see my hairstylist. One time I went to a woman who said she was great with curly hair, and she cut my hair with a razor, the razor cut. If you take a razor to curly hair, it just turns into a cloud, like a smoke bush, if you're familiar with that particular plant. And it did for me. And I had nice long hair that needed a cut. And she did something where I ended up having like a ledge and then a longer layer, and it was all fuzzed out, and I had to cut almost all of it off. It was heartbreaking for me. And so after that, I started doing a better job of interviewing my stylists. Someone who just said they were good with curly hair, that was no longer good enough. I actually tended to prefer people who either had curly hair themselves, which is what I have now. My stylist has curly hair himself, or have like a clientele with texture. And so I ended up changing what I looked for in my stylist as well. And that made all the difference in the world as well. So those are things like, if you're in a position, like one woman commented on my channel that she has been getting sort of chemical relaxers on her hair. And so she's both going through a gray journey and a curly hair journey at this time. I strongly recommend checking out on YouTube the natural hair community. It's incredible how much you can learn about how to take care of your hair if that's where you are. I don't know this particular lady who left this comment. I don't know where you fall on the spectrum in terms of how tight your curls are, but either way, an approach that includes fewer shampoos per week and way more conditioner might be what you need to care for your beautiful, beautiful curls. So overall, I still, as you know, if you've been watching my channel, I wear my hair blown out and I wear it curly, and I'll talk about that more in another video. This one's getting kind of long, but again, I have so much to say about this. It's been a lifetime journey, and I can just say this: learning to accept my curly hair has been part of my self-love journey, and it's been part of my ability to accept my gray hair, and just accept in general the way that my body is changing over time. I think a lot of us have been told that what we are naturally isn't good enough, and we learn to hate ourselves or learn to dislike or be uncomfortable or to hide certain parts of ourselves. And I think all of that needs to be deprogrammed. And that's partly why I even have this channel, is that I went through a realization that I had been lied to about my traits. And a lot of it had to do with my hair. I had been, the comments I had gotten were rooted in jealousy and fear and sort of adherence to unhealthy societal standards and divisions that I just don't want to participate in. And I decided that the only thing that I could do about it was to love myself. I couldn't change the way that society had constructed what was good and what was bad, and I couldn't change the people who had absorbed that and decided to go with it. But I could change inside of me the way I saw what my physical body was like, and I could learn to love it better. And part of that came through caring for it better. So in a future video, again, I'm going to make a series here. I'll talk a little bit more about that care, and I'll also try to find some folks that are still out there in the natural hair community that gave me a lot of what I have learned, because that's how I feel like the world is going these days. If you don't see it in the mainstream, you can find someone just like you on YouTube who knows a little more about it and can help you along. So I know that worked out for me. So for me, a huge part of moving from kind of hating my hair and feeling like I was other and that I was outside of fashion and outside of the norm of the community, part of it was switching the community that I was a part of. Different regions have different standards and different ways of treating one another. And I found that the region, my home region, wasn't always very kind to me. And by moving regions, I found some relief from that, honestly. I can't always move. I'm just saying that happened for me. Going to a place with some, not even necessarily greater diversity, but a different beauty standard, where curly hair had more, there's more space for curly hair. That was really good for me. And then learning how to take great care of it from people who also had hair like mine and weren't fighting it, but were embracing it, caring for it, moisturizing, being tender to it. A different way of handling it, from fighting it and taming it to encouraging it and nourishing it. And that switch was both a physical manifestation of, just the hair care routine, but it also was, it related to how I felt in my heart about my hair. I learned to love it by loving it, if that makes sense. So that's how I moved from kind of hating my hair and feeling othered and bad about it to really recognizing that it's super cute and it's a gift. And even if I got it from a single spiral perm that I got in the middle of going through puberty, it's still what my hair looks like now, and it's how it's coming out of my head. And I've learned to love it. I hope this helps. I hope there are those of you out there, even if you didn't, even if you don't have curly hair, maybe you learned something. Maybe it's something you've always been interested in. If you do have curly hair, I'd love to hear from you in the comments about what your journey's been like, and if you relate to any of this. Anyway, I hope you guys are all doing well, and I look forward to checking in with you guys again soon. Take care.